ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event on China and the EU, New Alliances for Climate Action. We would have really loved to invite you all to be with us today here in the Federal Foreign Office in the Weltsaal, as Andreas explained to you. Instead, in times of COVID-19, we have chosen for a digital format, and I am thrilled that speakers are joining us live from Beijing, from Brussels, and from London. Today's discussion could not be more timely. Both the EU and China are about to raise their respective climate ambitions. Less than 3 weeks ago, the European Commission proposed an increased emissions reduction target of at least 55% by 2030. The topic, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, is one of the top priorities for the German EU Council presidency. And China as well is sending a very strong signal to the world for more climate ambition. President Xi Jinping announced at the UN General Assembly that China aims to have CO2 emissions peak well before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, just 1 week before that announcement, leaders from the EU and from China met virtually to follow up on discussions at the 22nd EU-China summit in June. Climate change, along with biodiversity, was very high on their agenda. Both sides agreed to establish a high-level environment and climate dialogue. And you can rest assured that we will use the new format in the run-up to the COP26 to discuss how to further intensify our cooperation and jointly raise the level of climate ambition. So I am very much looking forward to our outstanding panels today, to our discussion, and it's now my great pleasure to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Wu Ken. And Ambassador, I'm seeing you there on the screen. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my pleasure to have this opportunity to open this event on climate change with the Minister of State Honor. Global climate change has us once again intertwines and nature belong to a community of shared future. What hurts nature hurts humans. No country or individual is immune to this global challenge, and we need to work together to deal with it. China attaches great importance to addressing climate change. This is not only the internal needs to achieve sustainable development, but also a responsibility to build the community with a shared future for mankind. We have integrated climate change efforts into our basic national policies. In 2007, the Chinese government formulated the national climate change programs. But since 2008, China's policies and actions for addressing climate change has been issued each year. Concrete goals and means have been determined in each 5 year. We decided to take the path of green and low carbon development. China has applied the new philosophy of green, environment-friendly, and sustainable development. In the past, the attention was paid to high GDP growth, but now we focus based on the harmony between man and nature. We have taken practical means to reduce emissions. In the INDC, China pledges by 2030 to reduce CO2 per unit of GDP by 60 to 65% over the 2005 level, raised the share of non-fossil fuels in primary energy consumption to about 20%. We strongly promote the energy transformation. On one hand, the private carbon markets in 7 provinces and cities, including Beijing and Shanghai, have been established since 2011. On the other hand, China has invested a lot in renewable energy. China ranks first in installed capacity of wind energy and solar PV. We have about 50% of new energy cars worldwide. We have played a positive role in tackling climate change. China is the major contributor to the Paris Agreement. At the same time, as the world's largest developing country, China established the South Cooperation Fund on climate change to provide 20 billion RMB to help developing countries adapt to climate change and foster clean energy. Chinese President Xi Jinping made a statement at the latest session of the UN General Assembly. He stressed that the Paris Agreement charts the course for the world to transition to green and low-carbon development, and all countries must take decisive steps to honor this agreement. China will scale up its NDC. We aim to have CO2 emissions peak before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. This has shown once again China's role as a responsible major country in addressing climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe and Germany are the pioneers of environmental protection and climate change initiatives. China is willing to learn from advanced concepts and experience. Since the 21st century, China and Germany have continuously fostered cooperation in the field of climate change. In 2009, the two sides established a climate change working group and implemented a larger number of successful projects. During the third intergovernmental consultation in 2014, we decided to deepen cooperation in climate change to setting even higher goals. Now, China, Germany, and the European Union all regard the Paris Agreement as a vital part of protecting multilateral values and global governance. From every perspective, addressing climate change is one of the most promising areas of cooperation between China, Germany, and Europe. The leaders from three sides held a video conference 3 years ago and established a China-EU high-level environment and climate dialogue and forged a China-EU Green Partnership. I believe that this will provide a new impetus to our cooperation in climate change. Finally, I wish this event a complete success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, and also thank you very much, Minister of State Niels An, and thank you for having us here at this location. Dear panelists, I will introduce you in a moment. Dear ladies and gentlemen from all over the world, I can say, because we have visitors from all different kinds of countries, so that's very good. On behalf of the Federal Foreign Office and dena, I would like to once again welcome you to our event, China and the EU, New Alliances for Climate Action. Today's focus is how the EU China and Germany can jointly contribute to achieving global climate protection goals, and how we are concentrating on solutions to one of the many global crises, such as the corona crisis. These are very big topics, I must say. Can we use the momentum and comprehensively align economic stimulus programs with investments in the future to transform the economy into a climate neutral and sustainable economy? There are many things on the agenda: the 5-year development plan, the Green Deal, speech at the United Nations, and many other things. So it's all about putting the SDGs and the Paris Climate Agreement into the focus. The successful joint work and cooperation of China and Germany in the field of the energy transition has quite some history. You are running some projects. We at the German Energie-Agentur are running many projects for about 15 years already. So we know that things can work very well, but nevertheless it's not enough regarding all the targets we have in mind. But in this sense, let us discuss today how and whether we can use this crisis as an opportunity for more cooperation, an opportunity to sustainable reform our industries and to develop common fundamental innovation and modernization processes. In order, of course, to overcome the recession and to foster environmental and climate protections. Sounds good, but it's everything but easy. We have 2 panels today. The first will start now, and I would like to introduce the speakers of our first panel. So we have Maria Spiraki. Hello, can you hear us? Oh, that's very good news that you can hear us. Okay. Good to have you. She's a member of the European Parliament, of the Nea Dimokratia Party in the European Parliament, yes, and vice chair of the delegation for relations with the People's Republic of China. So you're an expert on that issues, and thank you for being with us today. We have Niels Annen, Minister of State.
Thank you for having me.
We have Niels Annen, Minister of State. We just heard him talking to us. And we have Jochen Flassbart, State Secretary at the Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, a very well experienced climate diplomat, I must say, because I know from all the meetings we had before. Wendy Morton, Minister for European Neighbourhood and the Americas from the United Kingdom. Hello. Can you hear us, Wendy?
Hello.
Very good. It's working very well. And we should have Professor Lee, but I just heard that he is having problems to join our conference, which is very, very sad, because of course we wanted to have this Chinese perspective here. He's a former Director General of the Chinese National Center for Climate Change and member of high-ranking scientific committees, and he was very happy to join us today. So I hope we can solve these problems, but for the moment, nevertheless, we have to start. Ms. Spiraki, I would like to start with you with a question. The EU-China strategy that was published in March 2019 has the objective of introducing a shared, comprehensive China policy. But from your point of view, Ms. Spiraki, as an expert on China, how is that strategy influencing a long-term cooperation on climate change issues? And how do you assess the recent agreement on high-level dialogues for environment and climate in this context?
Once again, good morning from Brussels, and thank you for having me in this very high-profile event. I would like to say that it is crucial to underline a keyword that should be taken into consideration when we are discussing long-term cooperation of the European Union and China. And it is covering all domains, and the keyword is reciprocity. Although it is widely used in terms of trade and market access, I think that it is time to consider reciprocity also in terms of climate change agenda. And of course, it is important to protect our mutual ambitions in our planning. So, by encouraging China to meet the targets by 2060, as President Xi Jinping has already called, it is important to understand that we are encouraging the addressing of our climate targets, and of course, we work in complementary with our Green Deal. In Europe, as you all know, we have already adopted the first text from the Green Deal, which includes a lot of very specific instruments. I would like just to mention 3 of them. The first one is the EU taxonomy legislation, which is covering the way that we have to invest in the future in a sustainable manner. And it is important to keep it in mind, because if we finally decide to go ahead with the kind of complementary policies with China, we have to understand that one of the very first steps is how can we accept the same standards in terms of funding. The second one is the climate law. It is underway, and we are now debating on this today in the plenary. And the third one is the just transition mechanism, the mechanism that we adopt in order to facilitate the transition of regions that they are fully dependent on coal. Of course, we have instruments that they are not only working in terms of internal market, but also working in terms of the relationship that we have with countries, with third countries. And one of them is the carbon adjustment mechanism, and it is again one of the instruments that it is focusing on the way that we can finally ensure a level playing field of our energy-intensive industries. Having said that, I think that we can work complementary with China. And I would like to use an example, and I think that the main example is that China is ready to adapt her ETS, emission trade system. In Europe, we have emission trade system, and now we are debating on how can we expand it by including civic sector. And allow me to speak frankly, not without having some kind of debate within member states. But it is important to say that if China finally goes ahead with her own ETS, so we will have two ETS in the world, the one that we have in Europe and the other one that we have in China. And it can work complementary. And of course, I would like to conclude by saying this, that we can also go ahead by setting common standards in terms of new technologies and promising energy carriers. And the one that I mean is hydrogen, green hydrogen. It is important to understand that if we finally decide to address our goals, not only in China, but also in the EU, we have to work together. And this is a very good start.
Well, thank you, Maria. But there's no panel these days without mentioning hydrogen, of course. We will probably hear that later on again. But you mentioned a couple of points. In which point would you say hopes are highest at the moment when it comes to talks and negotiations with China?
I think that the highest point in this regard is ETS. Because if we decide to address target at a global level, we have to expand ETS at the worldwide. So it is important to have complementary ETS. As I can understand, according to the information that I have, is now at the final level, at the very first phase. They will focus on the development of market infrastructure. At the second phase, they foresee a simulation trading. It is approximately the same model that we have in the EU. And the third phase is how China could depend and expand the allowances that we are trading in the EU as well. So it is important to have complementary emission trade system in order to address Paris Agreement targets. And allow me to mention something that it is related to the US election. As you maybe know, the ratification of the withdrawal of the US of Paris Agreement will take place at November 4th. So we have to wait for the outcome of the US election as well.
Yes, we will maybe have to touch the US election later on again, but certainly that's a very important event coming up this autumn. But Mr. An, we have just heard this EU perspective here from Ms. Spiraki, and now Germany holds the presidency of the Council of the European Union, and the question is, of course, how will the German government use the presidency to support the climate alliance with China? I mean, are there any specific targets you have in mind and you would like to mention here?
Yeah, let me first of all also again welcome our panelists. It's really a pity that we cannot meet physically here in our Foreign Office, but this is the way it goes. And we all have to adjust not only to climate change, but also to COVID-19. I'm grateful for that opportunity, and we are very happy. We're all very happy to have you here. Because really, I think, at least I can say this, that we have been somehow surprised by that ambitious statement of the Chinese government. I believe we need to be realistic, so time will tell how ambitious the Chinese policy will be when implemented, how practical that announcement will be. But we are living in times, unfortunately, where we are seeing a kind of, there's even a kind of global polarization, not only affecting questions of energy policy, but through the broad of political issues. And it's important from our point of view, not to address disagreements that we might have. We are in a constructive, sometimes also complicated dialogue with our Chinese counterparts. But we need to be able to address issues that are really affecting the entire planet and mankind. And I'm grateful that Ambassador Wu made some references also to our climate initiatives in the past. And I believe that, because you asked for the German position, I really believe that the experience, the instruments, and also the public support that we are enjoying in Germany for our policies, together with the potential that China could bring to the table, can be a game changer. So I mentioned that in my short introductory statement that we have been able to establish a high-level commission on this. We need to use this. And I think that maybe also many of you listening in and watching us right now from virtually all over the world may also have some expectation that countries like China and Germany, but I would say at the end of the day, China and the European Union have a responsibility because of their size, of their economies, of their position in the multilateral system. So let's make use of that in the run-up for the COP26. That's a real, I think it's a real opportunity here. And I would also say to my Chinese friends, sure, it's hard to compare our countries one to one. That's never going to work. But Germany is leaving both coal and nuclear energy at the same time. This has never been done before. And I can tell you, I'm also a member of parliament. I'm talking to my colleagues, especially from the regions that are most affected by a real hard structural change. And we are working on ambitious instruments, national instruments, also to make sure that that change has been mitigated, that people feel supported, that we have something to offer for the regions that will be affected by the structural change. If I look at China, I could imagine that there's maybe also some interest in our experience in Germany. So it's not only a technical question. People are involved, and we need to have the support of the people. So I think technically, politically, but also when it comes to global climate diplomacy in a way, there is a lot to do. And I'm happy that in spite of COVID-19, we have an opportunity to address the issue here. And I'm happy that many of our friends and close allies are with us, and that that we are given that opportunity to address that global challenge.
Well, yeah, the just transition is an increasingly important issue with many other countries all over the world. The German government is having negotiations and talks about this, and exchange of views and examples on how to do that. Well, I mean, you mentioned the global polarization. Would you say that solving the climate crisis could even be a chance to get everybody out of this global polarization, or is that just a dream?
No, I don't think it's a dream. I mean, we are not naive. We have different views. We come from different traditions. And we have quite different political systems. But that shouldn't be a reason not to work together. And as some of you may know, Germany, until the end of the year, will still be a non-permanent member of the Security Council. What have been our priorities? Among other very important issues, Foreign Minister Heiko Maas was putting the question of climate change on the agenda. And we tried to discuss the link between climate change and its effects on security issues. And there is a direct effect. So part of the polarization that we are seeing is also directly or indirectly related to climate change. Our experience, by the way, was a tough one, because even some of our closest allies refused to discuss the issue with us, and our most important ally even more or less threatened us with its veto, so there is no resolution. But there is a discussion and an informal group of friends, and we are moving forward. So yes, it's not solving miraculously all the problems, but this is something everybody should be concerned about. And it's an issue that is more and more affecting all the societies around the globe. So let's try to see it as an opportunity.
Thank you, Niels. But let me now address Wendy Morton, Minister for European Neighbourhood and the Americas from the United Kingdom. Thank you very much for being with us. I mean, UK, of course, is a complicated situation at the moment, but when it comes to COP26, that has nothing to do with the EU, not really. But on the other hand, it might have something to do with the EU as well. So this COP26 was postponed. Maybe that was even a chance for further discussions. Well, this conference is extremely important. We had high expectations on 2020, and now we all have to do that in the upcoming year. It needs to demonstrate that the world is moving quickly in the right direction, and that the private sector and civil society are taking significant steps to raise ambition even on mitigation, adaptation and finance. So what is the UK as a host of the next COP doing to raise those ambitions and to push forward-looking decisions on the table?
Well, thank you, and good morning from London, first of all, and thank you for the invitation to join the panel today. It's great to be with you. Well, I mean, this event today is a great example of the great work that Germany is doing to drive global action to tackle climate change. And it marks 5 years since the Paris Agreement. But this is now a more urgent matter than ever before. To meet the Paris Agreement goals, we must decarbonise the global economy 3 to 5 times faster over the coming decade than we have over the last 2 decades. We likewise, we need to massively ramp up our work to build to climate change. And this is somewhere where the UK has a strong record to build upon. Between 1990 and 2018, the UK growing the economy by 75%. And last year, we legislated for net zero emissions by 2050, making us the first of a major economy to set a legally binding target. We've also committed to double our climate finance support to £11.6 billion between 2021 and 2025. And so as the incoming holders of the COP presidency and joint hosts of COP26 with Italy, we urge all countries to step up and deliver on climate finance commitments, especially the $100 billion climate finance goal. We will use the power of our presidency to bring governments, business and civil society together to accelerate progress in 5 key areas: adaptation and resilience, nature, energy, transport and finance. We welcome the recent proposals by the EU and China to increase their climate commitments, and between them, China and the EU are responsible for around a third of global emissions. But it's thanks to the efforts of the EU, China and the UK, among others, that there are now 126 countries responsible for around half of global emissions with climate or carbon neutral commitments. But we all know that there's a lot more that to be done before COP26. As announced by our Prime Minister on the 24th of September, the UK COP26 presidency, UN Secretary-General, will host a virtual leader-level ambition summit on the 12th of December, on the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, alongside France, Chile and Italy. And this summit will provide a platform for leaders, including the EU and China, to come forward with announcements of new, more ambitious, nationally determined contributions and long-term strategies to net zero, as well as new climate finance pledges, and ambitious adaptation commitments too. But none of us should lose sight of the fact that this matters enormously and that time is running out for us all.
Well, thank you very much for your statement over here. There's just one more question. Are there any specific are there any specific wishes you would have from this EU-China dialogue which could really support COP26?
I think it's important to look at where we stand in terms of climate change. I think it's imperative that as major emitters, we continue to lead by example on climate change mitigation. If we're to stand a chance of limited global warming to 1.5 degrees, and I think that due to the size of the emissions and economies, the EU and China will remain pivotal players in our efforts to tackle climate change for years to come. So, I think that's really, really important. And I think also across our COP26 campaigns on energy transition, on transport, on nature, adaptation and resilience and finance, there are huge opportunities to work with the EU and China over the next 5 years. And so I think it's important that we use those opportunities to work together, because, I think it's through collaboration that we're going to be able to better seek to ensure a cleaner, a greener future for us all, and especially for those most climate vulnerable countries and communities too.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Well, now, Jochen, your ministry has accompanied all the COPs so far, and I think you went to many of them in the past. And China's position over there changed. At the beginning, rather reactive. At the end, more active. But what would you expect here from China's contribution to the COP26, and especially what do you expect from this high-level dialogue which is coming up?
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot to the colleagues on the screen and Nils Ann here in the Weltsaal in the Foreign Ministry. I've never seen the Weltsaal so empty, I need to say, but this is the price we have to pay for the COVID crisis. Anyway, I'm happy to have this talk. And as you said, there is a long tradition between bilateral tradition in cooperating on environmental issues between China and Germany specifically. It lasts back to the 80s and 90s of the last century, but it got another dimension with establishing Chinese-German format, high-level format on environmental collaboration under Chancellor Schröder back in 2002. And as you said, yes, on the multilateral level, my experience was that China was more in a listening position, and everybody thought throughout the conference what will be the final intervention by China. And this changed a lot. This changed a lot during the last, let's say, 1.5 decade. China became a pioneer on the multilateral level, very often took the lead in the past prior to the Paris Agreement, together at that time with the US. These were the two, I mean, Europe was on board, but to be honest, the two forces to brought everything forward were China and the US. And now, as the US decided under this administration to step back from the Paris Agreement, it was our hope that a new alliance would come up, and it happened also together with Canada, with a very enthusiastic climate policy as well. So, what are my expectations also under our ongoing EU presidency? We have a huge potential between EU and China in the field of climate policy. I always like to look at it, as the Minister of State also said, that it is a EU-China collaboration. It's not a single German-China collaboration, but I believe that Germany can put some added value to it because we have this very long and trustful and close cooperation in this field. I see some fields, for example, first of all, technological cooperation, renewable energy have been mentioned by the ambassador, also e-mobility, traffic and transport, what you mentioned, of course, the hydrogen economy, very relevant in a number of key industries such as steel and climate, both in China and in Europe. I think we have to build up on the ambition. I mean, the system of the Paris Agreement works not top-down but bottom-up. That was a basic decision in Paris. Countries, or in Europe, a group of countries decide about their own national climate policy, the NDC, the climate target. And the price for this system is that we ended up in Paris not with enough ambition to reach the 1.5 to 2 degrees. And the consequence of that is that every now and then, exactly every 5 years, we have to go back to our NDCs, to our climate targets, and enhance them. This needs dynamics. Dynamics is the key word in the Paris system, and I'm very happy with the announcement, as already mentioned by several of the speakers, of President Xi Jinping started this dynamics, and Europe is responding to it. Actually, we're already with our Green Deal announcing it, but we are now in the legislative process with a proposal by the EU Commission to decrease our greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% to 2030, and this meets the announcement of China to peak prior to 2030. And where Europe wants to reach greenhouse gas neutrality, Europe wants to reach greenhouse gas neutrality by 2050. China announced the latest by 2060. I mean, this was unbelievable for me just 5-6 years ago. This is the dynamics we need. And let me finish my statement with a last area of cooperation. It has also been mentioned, and that is the issue on in the system of the Paris Agreement, the Article 6, which will provide the legal provisions for international markets, and that is on the multilateral level, but also, of course, we can cooperate on a bilateral level by linking existing emission trading systems, the European one, the Chinese one, which was developed in very close cooperation out of the European ETS, so there are a lot of similarities which would allow us to do exactly this kind of cooperation in the field of carbon pricing.
So do you really think that in this high-level dialogue, for example, we can really get a step forward when it comes to connecting ETS and the Chinese system and maybe talking about this carbon border mechanism? I mean, do you think until COP26 there is a chance for real success here, concrete actions?
Yes, as I'm optimist in principle.
That's very good. We like that.
And I'm even more optimistic because when we discussed and advised also the leaders in Europe to propose this high-level commission or this high-level talks between China and Europe on climate, we thought that these talks are needed to create the basis for an announcement of a higher NDC by China and Europe. Okay. But now it's already on this table, and this these talks will happen. And as we have already now the announcement of the targets, it's much more likely to discuss also about the instruments, how to get there, how to collaborate, and also how to use the carbon price signals, which are desperately needed to drive economies in the right direction. Because as long as you are trying to organize markets against price signals, it will afford a lot of legislation. And this is not something desirable.
Okay, so very good. You're optimistic. That's very good. So now we finally have Mr. Professor Li with us. Sorry for complications in entering our conference, but now you're with us. Former director, as I already said, general of the Chinese National Center for Climate Change, and member of high-ranking scientific committees. We are very, very happy to have your perspective here in a small moment. We heard some European perspectives already. And now, of course, we want to know from your side, what do you think about things which are going on, this high-level dialogue, COP26 coming up, expectations on 5-year development plan, so many topics. I think you could speak for hours, but give us a first input here for this discussion.
Yeah, sorry to be late to join the meeting, but I'm very happy to join such kind of discussion over the kind of international system. Yes, that's true. That's a very, very important message for China. Want to get carbon neutral before 2060. That will be a hot topic on the COP26. But besides that, I think the most important things, both China and European, we need to work together to push USA coming again. Everybody should remember that during the Kyoto, the USA also is kind of withdraw from the Kyoto protocol. But later on, 2007, the EU and China and other the kind of the countries working together in Bali Islands and put USA coming again. Then we have Copenhagen kind of agreement. Then everybody to make a contribution to include China and USA and Europeans. With this time, we still hope USA to come in again to join us. I think this also in the second term of the president. You say we remember that the Junior Bush in the first term they do not join the climate change action at all, but in the second half of his term, he's coming. Maybe this year, no matter who's the president, I think COP26 is a chance for EU and China and the countries working together. I think the climate change, we couldn't without USA. Also, they make a very big kind of contribution for emissions. And if he's the troublemaker, that's really kind of trouble. So we hope we push the USA into the COP6. Between the EU and China, and we need to do the real action, such as we have a big Bay Area in the Guangdong, including Hong Kong and Macau. They are trying to do the kind of further action for the climate change and the carbon reductions. They have almost the same size with Germany. Maybe we can use a kind of joint cooperation, push the kind of big Bay Area to be carbon neutral earlier, like Germany. Germany may be the carbon neutral in 2050. If China, the carbon neutral before 26, Guangdong area, the big Bay Area should be much earlier. So we need to have a real kind of practical actions. So not only a kind of a big target, but to have a real action. Maybe the EU, Germany, and China, we have working out for the special case studies. Maybe the kind of we have EU-China alliance climate change. Maybe we have Germany with a big Bay Area for alliance for climate change, for make their carbon neutral as early as possible, like Europeans, like Germany maybe. I make some analysis for that. They have almost a similar situation: population, economic scale, energy consumptions, everything almost the same as Germany. So maybe we can take such kind of such opportunity, have the not only align USA and EU and China, but have the kind of country-based and in China provincial-based or special area-based carbon neutral actions. That's my comments.
Just a quick question.
Thanks.
You were talking about practical exchange, very good. But could you give us some insight? What do you expect from the 14th five-year development plan or program in China? Is there anything concrete? Can we see some results from Xi Jinping's speech at the UN in this 14th five-year plan?
Yes, I think that we need to. Since we are working on that, this is the 16th, the 14th five-year plan is not the kind of fully published yet, but we try to kind of update such kind of a target after the announcement of President Xi Jinping. He said that before 2030, for peak time of the kind of CO2. Also, the carbon neutral before 2060. So everything should be make some changes. But the Chinese already make a lot of the kind of commitment for this kind of 14th five-year plan. I think this one will be a much better kind of target for both for non-fossil fuels, especially for renewable development. There may be get the kind of some new target.
Okay, so very interesting. We will watch that very carefully, of course, and we will be very curious. But before we go in our Q&A session, just two quick questions to Ms. Piraki and Ms. Morton. Ms. Piraki, well, if you think about this 14th five-year plan from China coming up, any special expectations you have having this speech at the UN in mind?
Yes, and thank you for the question. I think that maybe we can all understand that during this period, China's economy is transforming itself from an economy, allow me to say, a copy economy into a standard-setting economy. And in this regard, I think that China's economy has a huge potential in terms of technology and innovation. Having said that, I think that there is a lot of room on the way that China could improve and develop the technology of renewable energy production, but also the technology and the research and technology in order to accelerate green hydrogen production, which is our silver bullet. And by focusing in hydrogen, I would like to say that reading the German strategy for hydrogen, I have to say that it is much more detailed and much more focusing than the whole European plan that we have here in Brussels. So one of the pillars of the German in hydrogen is the complementarity. How can we finally achieve our own strategic autonomy in terms of green hydrogen? At the same time, we need maybe much more quantities of green hydrogen, but it comes from third countries. And in this regard, having in mind that China has also a huge domestic market, the production of green hydrogen is one of our common bets. And the second one, it is in terms of lower politics, but it is also, allow me to say, interesting and concrete as well, is the building renovation wave. Here in Europe, we will, in a way, upgrade the existing direction of building renovation, and we are planning to increase the rate of public building renovation about 3% per year. But in China, the renovation wave is now starting because the building capacity in China is huge. From 1995 to 2005. China's building stock nearly tripled, and it is extended to nearly triple again by 2030. Yeah. So it is important in this regard to understand that with building renovation, we have to understand that we have maybe a common field for investments. Good. And a common field for having shared raw materials, etc.
I interrupt you here because I have the impression you already wrote the 14th five-year plan for China. many good ideas, and I'm very certain that we will certainly hear something about green hydrogen in that plan. But Ms. Morton, just quickly before we come to our Q&A, anything you heard in that round so far which gives you hope for making COP26 a success? I mean, quite some optimistic statements I heard, but what is your view on that?
Look, we remain really committed to making a success of COP26. Events like this one today are a really good way of showing the importance of working together and coming together with that regard. It's going to be really important, that major emitters continue to lead by example. If we hope to be able to really bend the curve on emissions and reach our Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming towards that 1.5 degrees, then the bigger emitters will have to come forward with enhanced commitments. But I am always the optimist. But in this regard, I think it is really important that we're coming through COVID-19. There are still challenges, but there is also a great opportunity post COVID-19 to build back, not to just rebuild what we had before, but to build back in a better way and in a greener way as well. So I say it is really about us working together and collaborating together and being as ambitious as we possibly can in delivering.
Thank you very much. I think that's very good. Focus on opportunities. Indeed, we need to do so. And let's just have a quick look at the Q&As. Hannah, anything you want to address to us here?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in the chat, in fact. So we have questions on EU and China. We have questions for China, for Germany, and for global action. So I will start with EU and China because this is our topic today. So the first question is to Mr. Annen, that he has highlighted at the Munich Security Conference that climate diplomacy is a top priority for Germany and for Europe. And there's the question, how do we plan to increase the effort of factoring in climate in diplomacy in concrete? Then we have questions on concrete solutions on the ground from one company who says we have a lot of work going on in China, specifically in the sector of gas cleaning, CO and CO2 recovery. And there's always the problem to fund the first projects in China. And what are concrete solutions to overcome these obstacles? Then there's a question about the Chinese ETS. When is it going to start? And how can Europe and China work together to complement the systems on the ground? And the fourth question, and then I stop here, was for goals in the building sector in specific.
Goals in the
sector
targets.
Strategy, complicated factor.
Yeah, it's complicated. Well, I mean, let me start with Niels. I mean, climate diplomacy. Any targets? What's going on at the moment there?
I'm grateful. Thanks, Wendy, for being here and also for your remarks. I think it's a good example that we are moving forward. So building networks is important. Reaching out to the public remains crucial, because we all need the support of our population. So I think we are talking about environmental goals and ambitious climate goals, but there's also a social aspect included in what lies ahead of us. So that is very important. And I'm happy that our participant from China is now also with us. Thank you very much for your comments as well. I think it's very important, and that's with concrete regard to the question about climate diplomacy. We need to find a way to maintain the momentum, and their diplomacy is I think at the center of what we are trying and what we need to do. And we need also to reach out to those actors who are not right now fulfilling the climate goals, and it will be crucial, regardless of the outcome of the American elections, to find a way to include the United States in that framework. So I just want to mention, I know time is short, but a brief example. Of course, we are working almost on a daily basis with the administration in Washington. That's our job. But we also reach out to the private sector in the United States. We have been in contact to a level that was never imaginable before with authorities, for example, in the different states, with governors who are setting very ambitious climate goals, having an impact on the national debate in the United States. But governors and mayors today are part of diplomacy. They are part of the game. So I believe it's important to broaden our view and include that into our climate diplomacy.
I think that's a very good example of what happened in the US, talking to all the governors and mayors. I think that helped a lot over the last years. Well, Professor Lee, may I ask you about the question ETS? When is it going to happen in China? We are all wondering about this. Probably you can't answer this, but I mean, do you have any idea about this?
No, the clear idea, but everybody is making their big effort, everything going on. They're working on that. This I only can tell to you.
Yeah. All right. And the most concrete solution you see, I mean, is it the hydrogen issue, like, I mean, the next big thing we are all working on, and also in China and for the European Union? Will that be a major topic when it comes to solutions from your perspective?
Not only the hydrogen, but also all the energy storage technologies. If they have a high percentage of renewables, I think that we need the kind of energy storage system, include hydrogen. So I think that also include, I remember one of the questions for the CCS, CCUS. Both of them is very important for carbon neutral. Without the kind of energy storage technology, hydrogen technology, and CCS technology, the carbon neutral is very, very difficult to be achieved.
Good, thank you very much. Well, Jochen, I would like to ask you both questions as well. Like, I mean, the Chinese ETS, I know you have many talks about this. Do you think there is a chance that they will start that quickly, or do they need more help from us? And what kind of concrete solutions do you see on the agenda where we should really talk about when it comes to climate targets?
Yes, and if you allow, I also want to catch up the question
Certainly.
From the Q&As on private sector engagement in China. Number one, the ETS.
The sound is not working.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So one has to unmute and one has to use a microphone, so all these difficult technologies. Sorry. Yes, on the ETS, I know that China is working heavily on that. I was I had many talks with Zhenhua, who was leading the diplomacy for China for a long time, but he was also responsible for national Chinese climate policy, and he visited me back in 2009 to learn something about the ETS at the Federal Environment Agency, and from then on he constantly worked on that. They have the regional pioneer they have the pioneer regions where they implemented, where China implemented already the ETS, and now they are going national. And I think with a smile on the face, Zhenhua always told me they need a couple of weeks more to avoid the mistakes we have done in Europe. And I agree on that. It's easy to make mistakes, but I'm sure we will see it very soon, maybe at the beginning of next year. The second one were the next steps. I think a lot has been said already. Hydrogen and storage system, as the director said, are extremely important, not only to focus on hydrogen, but see it as part of the storage capacity. The last one, on the private sector engagement. I mean, first, number one is private sector is private sector, and we expect that the private sector smells that climate neutral technologies and investments will pay off, and therefore they also need to take the very normal entrepreneurship risks everybody needs to do. But there are some support schemes also from our ministry, from the Ministry of Economic Development, and also from the Ministry of Economy.
I'm a bit under pressure because Minister of State needs to go in just about 2 minutes. Therefore, just very quick question to both of you, Ms. Spirake and Ms. Morton, about the US election. Will the US election give COP26 a positive impulse, or should we rather not think about it?
Indeed. Nevertheless, I think that we have to focus on the stakeholders and start working on them and with them, as Minister has already mentioned. There are a lot of sectoral approach that we have to take we have to take them on board, and also a lot of states that they are quite interested on being on board. But allow me to say that we have, first of all, between EU, China and the US, one of the main topics that we have to address is to reinforce our political trust. And we have to build upon this. By taking on board different states and stakeholders coming from the US, and by having on board China with ETS and other measures, I think that we are making a significant step forward in front of COP26.
Thank you. Well, Ms. Morton, the US election ahead.
Just briefly, I mean, I think it's... Yes, interesting times. I think, look, it's important to remember that the US continues to be a place of great innovation and leadership on climate. And in the same week that we've seen China announce its carbon neutrality target, California announced the phase out of new petrol and diesel vehicle sales from 2035. Look, we're going to continue to work closely with the US at national and subnational level, regardless of the result of the election, just as we will continue to work with all of our international partners. And just like COVID-19, climate change really does remind us very vividly that we can't afford to operate in isolation, and that we are absolutely all in this together, and we need to work together.
Okay. Very good last word. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you, very much. You have lots of works on the table, and you have to run to other appointments. I can stay here and interview the German ambassador in Beijing, and later on have another panel discussion. But before that, we have a good 5-minute break, and we will be back with you. Thank you again, and all the best for the sake of fighting climate change. Thank you very much. Thank you. So welcome back to our online event today. We had a wonderful first panel discussion so far and a little break. And now I'm very happy to have a live interview with Beijing, with His Excellency, the German Ambassador to Beijing, Mr. von Götze. Good morning, or good afternoon, I must say.
Good morning to everybody.
Mr. von Götze is ambassador to China since 2018, and you have experienced the COVID-19 crisis on site. I don't know exactly where you have been from when to when, but now you have just recently returned to China. Well, tell us, how is the situation in China today, and is the crisis still affecting people's life?
Yeah, life is returning more and more to normal here in Beijing and the whole of China. That is not only reflected in daily life, but also in the macroeconomic data. And in August, the industrial production grew over 5%, and all the economy is on a path back to growth. And here in China, so normalization on its way. I think the major problem we are facing here for the German community for our economic, scientific, and cultural relations in China and Germany and Europe. Travel remains rather restricted. Very difficult to obtain Chinese visa. There is no number of commercial flights, and still the requirement of a 14-day quarantine when coming to the country. I've been here most of the time, so it was rather difficult at the beginning of the year. But as I said,
okay.
It is possible.
Okay. Well, that must have been a very interesting experience, I guess. Well, the EU has recently released its recovery plan to fight this corona crisis, and we're talking about green deals and green recovery programs. What is the situation in China? Are those discussions also on the agenda, or is it far away for the people over there?
So this is on the agenda here. For sure, and also in Europe, there is a strong focus on economic recovery and getting out of the COVID crisis, but definitely there is a strong emphasis here also on environmental question and on green recovery. Um, this could be seen also in the discussions on the National People's Congress here in this year, where first time those target has not been set, which is due to the corona crisis, but also shows that there are other priorities than only growth here in China now. The question of the National Congress, also investments have been decided on so-called new infrastructure, meaning 5G, but also new energy vehicles and artificial intelligence, and stress has been made that evolution has to improve further. But it also contains a stimulus package for traditional sectors as industry, transport, and coal-fired power plants. So it is a mixed picture all in all. We have seen a sharp decline in CO2 emissions due to the crisis, but now we have returned crisis level, and even the CO2 level now is higher than it was at the same time last year. But you can see the new focus also on the announcement that have been mentioned already in the discussion of President Xi in front of the General Assembly of the United Nations, that China wants to reach emissions for 2030 and be carbon neutral before 2060, which are in fact very new and as Mr. Amin said before, for everybody quite surprising.
Well, I mean, there must be lots of talking about the 14th five-year program in China, in Beijing. Do you think they are already almost done, or is there are there a lot of things to do, many adjustments due to Xi Jinping's speech at the United Nations, for example? What is your impression?
The five-year plan intensively worked on since months, since quite a while already. I'm sure that this new announcement will have to be worked now before it's finalized, and it is rather clear that to achieve the goals set by the President, the Chinese economy has to undergo a large-scale transformation, especially in the energy sector. Because up to now, China still derives 85% of its energy from fossil fuels. The 14th five-year plan set out specific targets and policies towards an energy transition and facilitate large investments in renewable energy in that. So it will be necessary to set clear objectives to diminish the role in the energy mix and to set new and ambitious targets for wind and solar. And also one point we will have to take care of and will have to be taken care of in the five-year plan is energy efficiency, as mentioned in the discussion before. In the building sector, there's still a lot of room to save energy through energy efficiency measures. So we hope to see all these points implemented as concretely as possible in the five-year plan. And we also hope to see that when it comes to China as broad, also these targets will
Okay. Well, let me quote for my next question Chancellor Merkel. She said, "We want to continue the conversation and set an example for multilateralism with fair framework conditions." Is this a reliable hope? I mean, we had the Davos speech 3.5 years ago. Now we have the UN speech just a few weeks ago. What is your impression here?
Yeah, Chinese policy has put a lot of on multilateralism already in the last month and years, and that has been repeated, as you said, by the highest levels many times. And we will have to continue to work on this. China is a very strong bilateral donor for many countries in the world, and we can expect that the Chinese footprint in many countries is still growing. And we will have to work with China to work on common standards and to see that China participates in the full range of multilateral bodies. In particularly, for example, we are working with China to see that it is working with the Paris Club and working on questions questions as debt relief and on transparency. And that will be our aim to see that China is counting in as many multilateral efforts as possible. We are also having bilateral projects with China, for example, for the low carbon steel production. In Kenya, the main point will be to develop standards that apply worldwide and that China and other countries can agree on.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. von Götze. Maybe a last question here. Well, no nation state is able to tackle challenges that are coming ahead alone. It's not only true for climate change. I think we can say we are in a messy global situation at the moment. But at the end, having the US election maybe in mind, do you think that tackling climate change could even be a chance to get back together on the table, all nations, all bigger nations and economic blocs all over there?
Definitely, climate change is a question that we can only tackle together. And Europe and China are already huge blocks in the world economy. So if Europe and China can achieve progress, that will be a big step forward. That's why the German EU presidency has put the climate agenda also in our relations with China on the table. If all the other important economic powers in the world will do it, that's even better. But I think that with China we have now built on having a high-level mechanism to discuss climate change questions between and China. Now we have to see that we make the best of it, that we achieve concrete results. And as I said, in particular in the energy sector, we have to get better. China still produces a lot of energy from coal. It still exports coal-fired power plants to other countries. Energy has been mentioned. There are a lot of questions where we still have to do more, and where we also have to combine our forces to either work hand in hand with multilateral development plans and other donors in the world. So there's a huge agenda.
Good, but thank you very much, Mr. von Götze. Thank you for your insights, and well, have a good and healthy stay over there. It's good to have you over there, so we can always get in touch and get information. Difficult times these days, and we all hope that we'll be visiting you soon over there, and that this time of the Corona crisis will soon end. Thank you very, very much again, and all the best for the moment. So, and we will resume shortly with our second panel. I will go to my seat over here and welcome our guests. Technique is a challenge when it comes to these digital online events, but we're trying our very best, and I think it went fine so far. So we have two people on the screens already. Somebody is missing, I see. Anyway, very warm welcome again to all of you, Ms. Hu, Mr. Professor Edenhofer, Mr. Grünberg, Ms. Heide, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants in the live stream from all over the world, as we know. We're still here at the Federal Foreign Office in Berlin, in the World Hall, Weltsaal we call it, in this great conference room. And in the previous panel, we have already discussed interesting topics related to the political dimension. So now we try to be a bit more, well, the first panel was not less concrete, but now we can try to go a bit more into details even. And I'm very happy that we have a very interesting panel over here. This is actually a very important topic also for us at the German Energy Agency, because we do have projects in China since about 15 years, and talking to our partners over there is very important, and in these dramatic, important times even more. We do have with us today 4 highly esteemed panelists live from Germany and China, and I would like to start with introducing Professor Edenhofer, head of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, who was just named recently awarded with this year's Umweltpreis, the environmental award, Germany's most prestigious prize, for his work on carbon pricing. Hello, Mr. Edenhofer. We have Ms. Hu, scholarly author and CEO of China's Green Development Program, a non-state actor in the field of climate action, and a developer of a city tool for China, analyzing local policies. Welcome. And we should have Ms. Heide. She's kind of, oh, she's over there. Ms. Hu is not yet on the screen. Okay, but I can't see her, but everybody else can see her. That's very good. So, hello, Ms. Heide. She's China correspondent of German of German newspaper Handelsblatt, and a business journalist with a focus on the Chinese and European economy. An excellent journalist, I may say. I love to read your articles. Thank you for being with us today. And of course, we have somebody. We have somebody with us, not digital, real life. I'm very happy to see Dr. Grünberg again. He's researcher at the Mercator Institute for China Studies and an expert on all things regarding China, I can say. A very well-known institute and very important for the discussion in Germany. Thank you all for being with us for this debate. Well, let me start with you, Ms. Hu, although I don't see you here, but you probably can hear me. How are you currently doing in China, and how did you experience the climate effects of Corona, especially during the lockdown? I mean, that was a situation with blue skies all over. Did that change anything in China? What is your impression?
Good morning, everyone.
We can hear you. Good morning.
You can hear me?
Yes, very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think I have some problem with the camera. I can see myself, but I don't see myself on your screen. But it's fine. Again, thank you for having me. Very pleased to join this panel at this important timing and contribute to this valuable topics, which I think will shape our future of the climate. So yes, it's true that Beijing has seen better air quality in the first half year, more blue sky days, less heavy pollution days. The first half year of 2020, the average PM2 concentration in Beijing actually 8% compared to last year. Well, I think it could be attributed to a combination of COVID-impacted economic activities as well as enhanced air pollution control measures. So before COVID in 2019, the air quality has already improved a lot. The PM2.5 concentration dropped almost 50% in the past 6 years. After COVID, even though China is one of the countries getting back to the normal economic situation, but most of the macroeconomic indicators are still worse than last year. For example, the fixed asset investment index is still lower than last year, while in 2019, the number actually increased 5% over 2018. So this, of course, resulted in less energy consumption and less pollution. We have experienced a little bit better environmental quality, but we're also seeing a rebound of export. So it's until now still hard to evaluate yet. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, we will talk about this later on. Thank you very much for these for this first introduction. Well, Mr. Edenhofer, you're not in China. You're in Potsdam, actually, or maybe at the moment even in Berlin. I don't know. Well, what are the, if you look, we have a global perspective on all these issues, and if you look at the lockdown all over the world and COVID-19 on a global scale, are there any bigger changes you could see? What are the global effects, and do you think there is anything that will stay with us of those effects?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm in Potsdam. What we have seen so far is a sharp decline in the global emissions, but only to a level of 2006. That's quite remarkable. So can we expect something persistent? That's not clear to me. So we see in many countries around the globe, in particular in Asia, that they are designing brown recovery packages, which is indeed a real threat for climate policy, because when this coal-fired plants will be in the end go online, so they are committed to emissions, which definitely absorbs the remaining global carbon budget for the 1.5 target or limit. So we see a lot of brown recovery packages. So there is a counterbalance that people now start to think a little bit more on green recovery, but there is one major obstacle here, and this is the high interest rates for countries, for the smaller Asian countries like Vietnam, like Bangladesh. There are signs of hope. Vietnam, for example, has announced a moratorium for coal, not a phase out, but a moratorium for coal. So it's in the end a mixed thing, and it could be the case that the decline of the electricity demand in some countries makes the recovery for coal less competitive. But this is, so to say, we are at a tipping point, and it is not clear at what side the coin will tip. I have some doubts that we will see some persistent effects without any dedicated climate policies, but at least we have now two regions. One is Europe, the other one is China, where we at least can expect some dedicated policy, and with this dedicated policy, so yeah, we might be in a position to move on.
Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting, because we are all talking all the time about green recoveries, but you say there are more brown recoveries in the background we are not talking about at the moment.
Yes, this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying there's more brown than green recovery packages, but some countries are definitely designing brown recovery packages, in particular in Asia, and this is a real threat.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Well, we need dedicated policies, that's certainly true. But Dana, let me ask you, I mean, there has been a tremendous effect on the economy in China, a huge effect, a major shock. And what industries have been hit hard, and how is the situation at the moment? And well, do you see that this recovery story has anything to do with green recovery, or is it even a brown one, or is it nothing at all? It's just a recovery at the moment.
Well, yes, the crisis has hit the Chinese economy very hard. There's been a decline in GDP growth of 6.8 in the first quarter, which was very, very hard. Mostly hit were service sector and retail, and we've seen a quite steep recovery in the industry production in the last few months. Which is not really a surprise, because this economy is state-driven. So what they can do the best is to just, tell the companies to increase their production. That's what they did. What we've also seen, what also has driven this recovery, has been infrastructure spending. And this is what should be concerning for climate protectionists, people that care about climate change, because this means more use of steel, for example. And steel, as we all know, is, it's not good when it comes to climate change or the protection of the climate. So the recovery of the economy, of the Chinese economy, has not been a green recovery. I wouldn't say so. Even though of course, the Chinese government claims to be wanting a green recovery, but in reality, it hasn't been.
Well, I guess it's not that easy to make a green recovery from now until tomorrow. I mean, would you say that at least bigger amounts of money is available for green investments in upcoming future, or do we have to wait for the 14th five-year program?
Well, I think the money hasn't been that big of a problem here. I think the main problem is that the industry relies a lot on sectors that are not good for the climate. Like the energy production relies heavily on coal. The steel industry is very important for the Chinese economy. Yes, there's been also a lot of investment in renewables, but since the energy consumption is rising, the absolute consumption of coal, for example, is increasing. What really, I talked to a lot of people about the recent commitment of Xi Jinping, that they want to be a carbon neutral in 2060, and that kind of gave a lot of people hope. I think that this will change something here in the policy.
All right, so there's recovery, not green, not brown, but there's hope somehow. But you are, Mr. Greenberg, you are looking at Germany and at China. You compare both situations a bit. Do you see some similarities getting out of this crisis, or is it all in all very different?
Well, I think there are differences, and I agree very much with the fact that China is very active in recovering, and there is a very state-driven, supply side driven recovery package. And looking at trade, for example, the levels are creeping back up to the levels that we had last year. It's still not the same. But in production, supply side, as was mentioned, it is going back to normal levels, but consumption is still low. And I think I would also second the statement that there is a lack of green recovery. It's not a distinct Build Back Greener recovery package that we are seeing. I also have hopes that this will come with the next five-year plan. But I think this year the focus really has been on just getting the machine back working, getting the economy to go again, getting people back into jobs. That has been a very strong focus. And I do hope that the signal that we see now from Xi Jinping, I mean, it is a very ambitious signal, right? And I have hopes that there will be some more concrete measures in the next five-year plan. And I do have hopes for that.
So, I mean, there is a chance that this change of awareness, maybe, or the mindset in the EU and in China could be kind of similar. Would be good timing then.
Yes, I agree. And I think it is very clear in both the populations of Europe and in the Chinese society and leadership, there's a very strong awareness that the climate issue is a very crucial issue that has to be dealt with quite soon. China knows that it is real, they are very vulnerable, so the awareness is certainly there. I think the easy solutions is what is lacking, especially in China, where you have so big differences regionally and industry wise. It's a big headache, I think, for the government in China.
Easy solutions are not that easy in Germany as well, I must say. But actually, you're certainly right. Ms. Hu, well, you have been at the forefront of convincing the Chinese public as well as decision makers that climate change poses a real danger for every one of us. You have also monitored certain aspects. Well, what is currently being done and what is practically being implemented? What is your view on the situation over there? Do you agree with what you just heard here from the panelists, or do you see something else over there?
Thank you. I think it's hard to evaluate if we don't have a agreed standard. The economic recovery could be always greener than it is now. We always want it to be greener as much as possible. But I think what's happening in China is, in short, I will summarize it like the high-level strategy and the political commitment is to pursue decarbonization, digitalization, which is kind of similar to the EU concentration. But in some of the investment activities and the economic activities at local level might not reflect that political commitment yet. So I think if I have more time, I could explain, like, first of all, you already heard President Xi said at UN, China is going to pursue a green recovery. In addition to the 2060 carbon neutral goal, he also mentioned green recovery. And back in May, when China released the economic recovery plan, in addition to the goals, we call it 6 pledges, which are more around jobs, the lifestyle, life standard, and maintain the economic players like food and energy security. And all of this 6 pledges is more on economic and social side. The priority for investment, fiscal investment, are still around, we call it 2N, 1M. It's new urbanization and new infrastructure. So what is new urbanization? If you look at certain strategy, that's mainly on increasing living standard, and there are a program to actually retrofit 390,000 old communities, and also there are some other infrastructure work, like to build more bike lane, which is kind of green oriented. And the new infrastructure, as you might already heard, that's more digitalization oriented projects, like EV infrastructure, like a data center, 5G. So I would say it's a kind of more around a similar philosophy. But if we look at the local projects that the local government are really investing or supporting or giving priorities to, we have actually reviewed several provinces in the first half, not the later half the year. The situation varies with different provinces, but we compare the projects with China's green industry category. So it's like a 50% to 40% share of the overall projects could meet those green industry requirements. So there are a green component of the overall economic recovery plan, and we hope to see more, because in the later half year, there might be more projects following the new urbanization and new infrastructure guideline. So I think my conclusion is, yes, even though there is no name of, like a green labeled economic recovery plan, but the plan supports China's long-term high-quality economic growth strategy, which puts eco-civilization at the core.
Good.
So again, the strategy is there, but the implementation is hard to say.
Well, Ms. Wu, well, thank you very much. Very, very interesting information. Thank you for that. But I mean, these are all about that was all about technologies, investments. I mean, are there also some discussions to change, like the economic framework when it comes to carbon prices, the Chinese ETS system, and so on? We are talking about this for ages, and from the European perspective, that is very important. Are there any talks about, putting that to the front now?
Definitely, there is a big push to implement the carbon market as soon as possible. We hope to see some plan coming out later this year or early next year. A lot of discussion on that. And there is discussion of reduced fossil fuel subsidies. And there is also discussion about, I think there's one example that at the beginning of the post-COVID economic problem. There's ask about maybe we're going to reduce the subsidies to some like EV programs.
Okay.
But actually, the subsidies was not removed. They maintained the subsidies to the EV program.
Okay, well, thank you very much, because I guess that's a very important issue, and I know it's a very important issue for Mr. Edenhofer, who is with us today. Well, carbon pricing is in the center of the debate in the European Union at the moment, at least we think it is. But what is your impression? I mean, do you think that this crisis can be a chance to tighten up this process a little bit and get together between the EU and China to speed it up, the talks about a joint ETS maybe one day?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I see basically two interesting developments. Let me start with the European Union. So in the European Union, there are two fundamental ideas on the table. The first one is the new reduction target, 55%, which is so ambitious that in one way or another we have to improve carbon pricing schemes in the EU ETS and in the non-ETS sector. So this is what we have expected, but there is now an additional component which enters the stage. And this is that the EU wants to have an own tax base, so to say. And they are discussing, for example, border tax adjustments. They are discussing revenues from auctioning permits and a few other taxes like the plastic tax and the financial transaction tax. But it turns out that by far the most important revenue generating mean would be auctioning permits. So over the next 2 decades, it's roughly 800, dependent on the scenarios which you calculate for the carbon price, it is almost 800 billion euros, which is enough to pay back the debt and to endow the EU with their own resources. And this is something which basically makes even in the Commission people interested in carbon pricing who normally do not take care about climate policy. So this is one thing why carbon pricing is now gains a new momentum in the EU. So then the second aspect is the announcement in China, 2060 carbon neutrality, but it seems to me even more important is the peak of emissions in 2030. And when China is implementing a national carbon trading scheme, of course, it would be worthwhile to think and to talk how to, let's say, not necessarily link it immediately, but how to coordinate it in a reasonable way. And it seems to me convincing and just kick off talks with China on the coordination of carbon pricing schemes, put it in this way, is much more effective and much better than to talk about border carbon adjustments. I'm quite skeptical about this because any tariff asks for retaliation, and I think we do not need a trade war caused by climate policy. What we need is much more multilateralism. And I hope that the new announcement of China brings us in a position to coordinate the systems, not to link them immediately, that would be not possible, but at least to coordinate them. And I see in both regions, in both in the EU, but also in China, a new momentum for carbon pricing.
Mr. Edenhofer, we're talking about targets, climate or carbon neutrality, we're talking about technology when we talk between the EU and China. Are we maybe not talking enough about economic framework conditions? I mean, should we push that more on the agenda when it comes to the high-level dialogue, for example?
Yes, I fully agree. And the reason is the following. Most people who designed climate and energy policy in the past were extremely successful with the regulatory approach. We made some progress in that. But now The EU has announced a target, not only 55% by 2030, but also carbon neutrality by 2050. And this can only be achieved when all the sectors will be transformed. And this cannot be achieved with a pure regulatory approach. So here you need something which creates strong incentives for the sectors and creates strong incentives for innovation.
Okay.
And the regulatory approach is not good enough to create incentives for the innovation. And therefore, I fully agree. What we have to do is to push for carbon pricing, not because of a lack of ambition. It's because of the enormous ambition announced by the EU and also in China. That's the reason why we need carbon pricing more than ever. Unfortunately, many people perceive carbon pricing as a mean which is not effective in the end, which is only a tool when you want to have gradual changes. I see it completely different. I see carbon pricing becomes more important when you have transformational and non-marginal changes in mind.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ms. Hu. Listening to that, what we're just talking about, economic framework situations and so on. I know that some people have been quite skeptic evaluating the process since Davos in the last 3.5 years regarding that speech over there. But now this carbon neutrality, I mean, do you think it will be on the core of the agenda, and will we see concrete steps in the next 5-year program in China coming up these weeks?
I think so first of all, I think it's very significant that President Xi announced that carbon neutral goal at UN. It's very significant because it's a presidential announcement given China's political framework. I think that's a pledge, and it's not a Davos speech. So, but I think with that goal, that actually opens windows to many other policies which are more important for the short-term actions, including the 14th five-year, including the carbon market, including many other activities. Because the one thing I have seen is that with that announcement, many people from business, from different industries, they have been asking, what does that mean? What can we do? We need to change our behaviors. So that is very important. And I think for 14th five-year plan, there's been a lot of discussion on that. Of course, China will continue to include some of our environmental target that we used to have for that plan. And for climate, we will probably have the carbon intensity target and all those targets. We have renewable energy target. But I think there might be still opportunity to push for the carbon cap target, which is critical for economy-wide carbon market. I'm not sure, but there is discussion. As I said, with this momentum, it seems there will be enhanced policy to be considered. And also, 14th five-year plan is not one plan; it's a set of plans. You have this overall framework. We also have the specific plans for certain sectors, like for energy development plan for the 14th five-year plan. And in that plan, coal-fired power plants, targets on renewable energy, targets on probably coal consumption cap will be all very, very critical for us for the next 5 years. So I think this momentum or this 2060 announcement pledge really opens window and gives us a more confidence to advocate for more enhanced environment and climate policies.
Thank you, Ms. Hu. I would like to have Dana Heide's view on that issue as well. I mean, we all know that pressure is high in China But on the other hand, I heard the number like 100 gigawatt coal power plants are like kind of exported from China and so on. Well, how serious is that statement, and what do you think? What's your impression?
Well, yeah, thanks for the question. I would agree. Of course, it is a momentum, and I don't want to downplay this. You know, coming from Xi, this is a whole other level here in China, where, you know, what the central government says is then trickles down to the local governments, and they implement the measures. But we've also seen, and you mentioned the Davos speech of Xi Jinping, where he talked about free trade. We are far from free trade right now. So I just want to emphasize, like, we should be skeptical about what the Chinese government, especially when it's so high up, pledges, and if it really walks the talk later on. So I think, and I've talked to several experts about this, I think what will be crucial in the next, I mean, there need to be, if they really want to achieve this goal, which is very, very ambitious, there need to be steps taken immediately. So yes, we should see it in the upcoming 5-year plan, and we should see it in measures that need to be taken in the next even couple of months, I think, because, you know, if you want to really achieve that, you need to start right away.
Good. So we will have to watch that carefully. One question to you, Mr. Grünberg, before we go to the Q&A session. In a recent paper you wrote, you said it's by no means a given that China will be building back greener after the crisis. So you're a bit skeptic here. Why is that?
Well, I think that, and maybe I can tie the 5-year plan in here in the question. It is not given, and I think we see that China is not really pursuing an immediate, but let's say, taking the chance to build back greener immediately, the way that it has at least been announced in the European Union, for example. And for example, the new infrastructure development plan is not really green per se. It is about digital infrastructure, new infrastructure. So I think we had a missed opportunity here in the months directly after the crisis. But I think long term, if you look at the 5-year plans, I see a positive trend. And if you look at since the 10th 5-year plan starting in 2001, there's a very steady increase of targets pertaining to environment, resource use, and efficiency. So I think that will continue the next 5-year plan, and it's very correct what Ms. Hu said, that the importance is really in the regional plans, in the industry plans, and they will follow the next year after the 5-year plan. And I do see a lot of potential for betterment here, because this is a very important issue, and now with the pledge, I think we can see that this is taken seriously.
So you would strongly recommend stronger cooperation?
Yes, I think cooperation is very crucial here. I think not waiting for each other, but strong statements from the European Union to demand that China is delivering on its own promises. China really, the central government has to make sure that local governments are aligning their own investment strategies with the ambitious targets of the central government. This is one very important aspect that has to be dealt with in the sectoral plans, for example. Good. But cooperation is really crucial, and we need to establish, a very strong mechanism that makes sure that we all adhere to the same standards and that they are stricter and stricter.
Thank you very much. Well, EU also needs to deliver on our promises as well. It's not that easy. Hanne, are there some questions from the Q&A?
Yeah, there has been a lot of debate on climate neutrality in China.
Yeah. So
as you can imagine, but I guess this topic has already been addressed in the discussion. And I just want to quote 2 questions here. One was on the effect that climate change action is focusing very much in EU and China relations on energy and mobility, and whether it is not necessary to look also at other sectors, like, for example, land use sector in the future. And there was a second, a bit more critical question, also referring to what Mr. Grünberg has said lately. Could the competition that is existing between China, US and Europe, for example, in the digitalization sector, hinder possible new alliances and action in the field of climate and energy?
All right, so we have another 7 minutes, and I would like to use these two questions to go in a final round. Mr. Edenhofer, maybe you want to start about the other sectors. Are we talking too much about energy and mobility, or is that because of good reasons?
Now, there are good reasons to focus on energy, in particular the power sector, industry sector, transport, heating and building. So these are important sectors. I do not deny that in the agriculture sector, a lot has to be done there. That's of course. And also, what we should also do is we should talk about negative emission technologies which allow us to absorb carbon from the atmosphere. That's a very, let's say, a contentious debate. However, we need this debate because carbon neutrality by 2050 means that we have to compensate the emissions, for example, from industry processes. We have to compensate them via negative emission technologies. And everybody knows that all these technologies are not ready. They are not ready for upscaling, but we need pilot projects. We need research and development along these lines. And therefore, we should also talk about this sector. So two sectors are missing, the agriculture sector and negative emission technologies. But this is not a substitute for mitigation in the other more traditional sectors. This is very, very important. Otherwise, we cannot achieve or we cannot limit it within our given carbon budget.
Misu, what is your view on that? Are there even more sectors than energy and mobility? You were speaking about the cities and as an issue, for example.
Yes, the building sector is very important. But I still emphasize industry is the hard to abate sector, as you all know, and China still have it still accounts of around half of our GDP. So industry sector is very critical, not only in terms of the energy efficiency level, but also in terms of the structure of the energy sector, like how much energy intensive sector, industries, how much like more, light and creative industries. I think that's very critical. And back to the question of 14th Five-Year Plan, the keywords will be, as we call it, high-quality growth. China aims to transit from like a high energy intensive, less low carbon to more low carbon development. And I think decarbonize the industry structure by focusing on looking for the new growth engine in the creative industry and the high technology industry will be very critical.
So, I mean, this is interesting because you mentioned industry, and of course, it's also kind of energy sector as well. But you're certainly right. How to abate sectors. Well, I mean, talking about industry and cooperation, that's also a question of trust. Of course, of reciprocity, as we were talking about in the morning today. So I mean, that's probably a challenge for the exchange between EU and China. We at dena, we have many projects where we talk about industry projects, and we always come across those questions. Dana, what is your view on this? I mean, what do you see here coming up?
I thought the second question was there was about this cooperation issue, and I think that especially given those increasing differences that China and the EU have, climate change is probably one of the last fields where there's cooperation possible, and do think that it was no coincidence that she pledged this just like a couple of days after Chancellor Merkel addressed this issue of climate change after the EU-China summit. So I think this could be a chance of cooperation. Climate could be a change of cooperation, and both countries should use it. And as you said, like there have been some disappointments in the past, I think, in the cooperation between EU and China. And China should probably use this opportunity to cooperate.
Climate change without having China on board doesn't make sense. It's just too big of a country, and they're really very intensively working on that issue. But it seems as if many things come together here. So industry policy, reciprocity, world trade questions, and the situation between the US and Europe and China and everything. I mean, is there a chance that this urgent climate change issue can really help us to get out of the mess?
That's a very big question. I certainly have hopes that we can align ourselves or create maybe a floor for how deep the cooperation and the relations can really sink to make climate cooperation really the anchor of relations. I think that is a hope I certainly have, and I see there's willingness on both sides to do that. I think the strategies will be very different in the European Union and in China for the next 5 to 10 years, how to achieve carbon neutrality. But I think we can learn from each other, and this has to be a mix of cooperation and competition. Cooperation on the willingness of that we want to solve this global problem together, but also competition for the best solutions. And China is very, very close to have better solutions that we have on several technical aspects, right? So I think it's very callful that we cooperate on these issues and establish a healthy cooperation on a political level, but also competition for the best technical solutions, and we have to be open for solutions that go both ways.
Well, thank you. Misu, I know that many other countries look at Europe and China, and they say if Europe and China are going to make it, this climate change issue, then there's really, there must be something on it, and then they really get into that issue as well. So what would you say? Is climate change like an anchor for further cooperation? Can climate change, solving climate crisis, bring everybody back on the table in near future?
Absolutely. I agree with this, and I think it should be. Because climate change is not only an environment issue, it's a and social issue. So it's a placeholder of so many topics we have been talking about. I think, for example, as I said, the industry sector, the iron steel overcapacity issue, and the decarbonization of industry sector, that could be one topic we can share a lot of experience and technologies and lessons. And I think secondly, the green finance, as I know Europe and China has a taxonomy dialogue that is very important for next step. And really, I think for even collaboration with other regions, like in Southeast Asia and Africa, there might be some disagreement or competition, I would say, but there are the shared interest would be how to work together to help those regions to pursue their climate actions, if we could partner. Of course, the carbon market collaboration that has been going on for decades, I would say. So all these areas is not only an environment topic, but also socio-economic topics.
Thank you, Ms. Wu. We have to come to an end, but I have one last question to Mr. Edenhofer, if I may, and I hope that's okay for the rest of the panel. Well, we have the US election coming up. We don't know what's going to happen, but there could be a moment, maybe a moment of time, where suddenly China made huge announcements, and the US makes huge announcements, and the EU made huge announcements when it comes to climate neutrality and so on. I mean, that could be a moment of time. Are we prepared enough to use that moment of time, or is there a risk to, you know, that this moment would pass away without enough action from our side?
I think that's a great question. I think it is good to remind us that we should be prepared for this great moment. And I would say, no, we are not prepared enough, because, and I agree that it was intentionally that China has basically pledged immediately after Europe has announced the EU Green Deal. It could be the case that US is doing the same. And just to think about, so these are the three regions, and if these three regions would cooperate, this would really give us a lot of hope that in the end we will succeed. But institutionally, so what are the frameworks, and working on the frameworks, we are not well prepared for that, and we are well advised to think on this issue in a much more optimistic mode, and not to celebrate our frustration and our pessimism all the time, because sometimes there is a historical moment and nobody knows when the historical moment will emerge, but it could be the case, and let's be prepared for this.
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, that was it already. We had a great discussion here, Mr. Grünberg. Thank you very much. My digital colleagues over there at the panel, wonderful. I would love to keep on discussing with you, and I think we should look more moments like this. So we finished by saying there might be a historical chance coming up. So we got a glance on that, and we all go home now, here and all over the world, to those people who were listening this panel discussion, and think about that moment of time which might be coming soon. Let's really use it. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to the panelists, to all the visitors from abroad, and thank you, the Federal Foreign Office, for having us and for cooperating with us, the German Energy Agency, on this very interesting conference. All the best to everyone, and bye-bye.